أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد Shaban Mubarak to all of you as well as the Eid that are in the beginning of the holy month of Shaban with the wiladat of the A'imeh as well as Abul Fadl Abbas alayhi salam. May they be Mubarak for you as well. The time for remembering the births of the A'imeh, in particular Abba Abdullah, in our history, when we look at how the Ahlul Bayt dealt with this birth when Abu Abdullah was born, we see that it was a time for remembering not only the coming of the blessings of Abu Abdullah himself, but rather it was also a time for remembering um, the apex conclusion of his life as well, which was basically a time for mourning and crying over the difficulties that he would face. So when we look at the hadith of Abu Abdullah's birth, we see the Holy Prophet, let's say the Prophet um, and Imam Ali as well. When this birth is introduced to us through the hadith, we see that these Ma'asumin also have a very strong attention towards Ashura and Karbala, even at the very birth of Abu Abdullah. Right? At the time of his coming to this world, at that very time, they have this focus towards Ashura and Karbala. And from that time, basically, they link in various aspects and various manners um, Abu Abdullah to this ultimate Azim, the conclusion, um, um, which basically sparks for mankind, really, not just Shias, for mankind, it sparks an attention towards justice, attention towards Tawheed, an attention towards standing up for what is right. To the point where when the 12th Imam in our hadith has been told that when he will reappear, he will address the world and he will say, "Oh, the people of the world, my Jad Hussein was martyred while he was thirsty." So the only way someone would be able to introduce themselves via another person is if the other person was famous and already understood who that person was. So this methodology that the Prophet Imam uses to address the world and say, "Oh, the people of the world, I am the son of the person who was killed, Atshana, thirsty, right? While he was thirsty." Well, it kind of signifies for us that at this time the world will have some understanding and recollection of who Imam Hussein was and is really. So many other ahadith point to this idea that the person of Abu Abdullah and the personality of Abu Abdullah is one that resonates with mankind, not just Shias in particular. That's enough for an intro towards the life of Abu Abdullah, the sun, as well as the moon that follows the sun, Abu Fadl Abbas alayhi salam. Both of them intertwined in a very unique manner from birth until the end. This was just a small talk that I felt important to share before we commence today's session, especially as we are entering these holy nights, these nights of remembrance. Please say salawat so we can start. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ala Last session, I had asked you guys that if the pace was okay or not. And we had covered 3 lessons last session, right? And some of the comments were that the pace was okay, and other comments requested that if we could slow down the pace a little bit. So I intentionally choose to only cover two lessons today, inshallah. And we'll go further into the explanation of what does it mean really in some of the examples and some of the examples that the Holy Quran brings forth of these two lessons. We're going to open up those examples a little bit and dive a little bit further into that. Which let's get started. So today's um, overall breakdown of the durus shall be the lesson number 13 and lesson number 14. At the end, I have a small passage which tells us about the holy month of Sha'ban and what does it mean spiritually now for us to be entering this holy month and going towards the holy month of Ramadan. So inshallah, let's start with lesson number 13. See, we studied, alhamdulillah, in the past, the fi'l al-madi, the active tense, the active past tense, where in the active past tense, the haraka on the fa'ul fi'l and lamul fi'l, they were both constants. Okay? It was constant that it was going to be fatah. So you didn't have in the active past tense the fa changing its haraka or the lam changing its haraka in its innate sense, right? But the ainul fail, it was a variable. Depending on the the root letter words you chose in that particular fi'l, right? The ainul fail would change. For example, nasara. And here we have the sad, which is the ainul fail, has a fatha in it. But alima, in this particular example, we have the ainul fail has the kasra on it. Okay, so this ainul fail was a variable in the active past tense. When we look at when we look at the passive past tense, all three harakat are in fact constant. So if I was to take nasara and make it into a passive past tense, it would be so the active past tense had the constants in the lamul fail and the fa'ul fail in terms of the haraka being fatha, and the ainul fail changes. The ainul fail would, depending on the type of root word you're using, the ainul fail would vary based on that. When you're trying to create a passive past tense, now in the passive past tense, the actor is not mentioned. So the actor is not mentioned, right? The subject is not known, right? And the emphasis, therefore, is on the occurring of the action, occurring of that particular fi'l, right? And on what it occurred upon, okay? So we'll get a little bit into the meaning first. We'll get into the meaning later. First, we have to go through the appearance of how a fi'l al-majhul, a madi majhul is formed. So if I have the word nasara in the active past tense, if I was to convert it into a passive past tense, what would it become?
نصرة.
Nusira. Now, how about alima? If I had alima as the active past tense, what would it become in the passive past tense?
Ulima.
Ahsant, ulima. So the fa'ul fail, the ainul fail, and the lamul fail remain constant in the sense that the haraka, the haraka on them is always in this particular format. When it's in a majhul form, right? When it's in a passive past tense form, then it becomes fu'ila. And it doesn't matter what content, in terms of root words you place into this particular qalib, this particular mold, it will always be this way. The fa'ul fail has a dhamma, the ainul fail has a kasra, and the lamul fail has a fatha. Now, so one of the famous lines in history and on the members, you've heard it as well, right? In some of the riwayat, it's there as well. It's قتل الحسين. قتل الحسين. And then sometimes the word atshana is at the end. Okay? What's happening here? When we say the word قتل in an active past tense, it was قتل. Okay? When we take the active past tense and we turn it into the passive past tense, we're taking all importance and focus away from the actor and rather focusing it entirely on the action and upon whom the action was committed. So qutila, meaning it's not important for us who did this action. What's important is that this great action took place and upon whom it took place. قتل الحسين بكربلاء emphasizes entirely that this particular action took place on someone so great, so profound. The actor, we take all emphasis away from them. So this was a slight delve into the ma'ani, right? This is a higher level of an Arabic science, which tells you why we use certain tenses in the Arabic language and what these uses provide in terms of emphasis and meaning. So when we have fi'l al-majhul being used, we'll see some examples right now. The attention is being driven away from the actor, the subject, right? And it has been taken towards the person whom the action was done upon. Any questions so far? Mr. Yasmin, you had a question? So this is the chart which you've seen before. We've seen this chart before for the fi'l al-madi. It's very similar to that, except now we have instead of nasara, the format that was constant is being applied. So it becomes nusira. Right? Remember in fi'l al-madi, you had to see what the haraka of the ainul fi'l is. You couldn't otherwise make this chart for yourself. You had to know what the haraka was from before, right? But in past passive, madi majhul, we don't need to know. The qalib, the appearance of that particular form is constant. It's always nusira, nusira, nusiru, nusirat, nusirata, nusirna. Okay. So are you guys familiar with the past passive now a little bit? Can I request somebody to conjugate for me the active passive in a slightly quicker manner, right? And then try to conjugate the past passive as well. I want to see if you have practiced conjugating the past passive as I had requested before, right? Such that it becomes almost second nature to you, right? Then somebody try to conjugate the active past tense, and then I can request somebody to go ahead, Sister Yasmin.
So you want me to do the past tense, right? Am I right?
Yes, for Nasara, do the past tense.
Okay.
And then after that, do the past passive.
You mean present tense, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Nasara, Nasara, Nasaru, Nasarat, Nasarana, Nasarana, نصرنا نصرت نصرتا نصرتما نصرتم نصرتي نصرتما نصرتن نصرت نصرنا.
Okay. Okay.
Present tense?
No, not present. I want the past passive now. So nusir.
I don't know that one. I know only present tense.
Okay. So nusira is here displayed on the screen for you. The table is very similar to the past one, except the apparent form for the fa'ul fail and the ainul fail are constant. So as before was nasara, it is now here nusira, right? Before it was nasara, nasara, now it is nusira. Before it was nasaru, now it is nusiru, right? And the same trend follows through. Nusirat, nusirata, nusirna, nusirta, nusirtuma, nusirtum, nusirti, nusirtuma, nusirtunna, nusirtu, nusirna. Okay. And over here they have the dual and the plural listed for the متكلم الوحدة. Typically, it's combined into one, and typically the متكلم الوحدة, the first person, right, is just in the singular or the plural, where the dual factor is in fact the exact same as the plural. Let's read that way. Okay, so are you now, Sister Yasmin, more familiar with this particular chart? Can you try this chart now with the nusira?
Nusira, 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 Nusiru, Nusirat, Nusirata, Nusirna, Nusirta, Nusirtuma, Nusirtum,
Mhm.
Nusirti, Nusirtuma, Nusirtunna, Nusirtu, Nusirna, Nusirna.
Excellent. Now, can somebody else try this with the word alima, please? So you'll be using a very similar form to the chart. I just want to make sure that you've got it concrete. Somebody else try now with the word alima, this particular chart.
Right.
Bismillah. Go ahead.
Alima,
So
Alima.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Alima is the active past tense. We want the past passive tense.
Okay.
For alima, it would become what?
Ulima.
Ahsant, ulima. And now,
Ulima, Ulima, Ulemu. Ulimat, Ulimta,
ulimata.
Ulimata, Ulimna.
Mhm,
Ulimta,
mhm,
Ulimtuma,
mhm,
Ulimtum.
mhm,
Ulimti,
mhm,
Ulimtuma, Ulimtunna.
mhm,
Ulimtu,
mhm.
Ulimna.
Ahsant, ahsant, ulima. And thank you for stopping at the dual, because the dual and the plural for the first person, in fact, are the same. And in many Arabic texts, you will see them not listed as two separate entities. Rather, it will be one entity. Let's go, alhamdulillah, familiarize ourselves with this particular chart. We understand in terms of meaning what's going on. Let's go towards some more context. So when you have the active tense, it says qatala. In the passive tense, it becomes qutila. In a very similar manner, when you have fataha, it becomes futiha, right? But when we have some words, right, like the word kadhiba, right? Right? Some words have a very difficulty in turning into the passive, right? So we don't have passives for certain words. If you look at the Arabic dictionary, it will assist you in that. Right? So this is important that that we understand that and we take a look at that. Yeah. So the main criterion for this is something that we studied before. So we studied fi'l al-lazim and fi'l al-muta'addi, correct? Do we know what fi'l al-lazim and muta'addi are? Can somebody remind me for lesson number 10? What is fi'l al-lazim again?
It
The
is
Sorry, one of you guys go ahead.
the lazim is the action that's limited to the subject, so you don't need an object for that one.
Okay,
Like when you say kadiba, you can have you don't have an object.
And what about muta'addi?
Mutaaddi is the action by the subject. You pass it on to the object itself.
So a
So
fi'l
you
that,
feel like, for example, like katala, then you need like what did they kill, right? So you need an
maf'ul,
object.
you need a maf'ul basically. You need an object which has that particular action taking place on it. Ahsan. So verbs that are muta'addi, they can be turned into majhul. Words that are lazim in the Arabic language, you will find that they cannot be turned into majhul. Okay? Is everybody comfortable with what's on this particular slide?
yes.
Okay. So let's now, having equipped ourselves with that understanding, let's look at this verse. I've brought the verse as it appears in your text. I've also brought the full verse from the Holy Quran itself. And there's some points that I want to mention about this particular verse, especially as we are in the month of Shaban, a month where the Holy Prophet has said that who will assist me in this month? And then when he was asked, what type of assistance do you want, O Holy Prophet? He said, who will assist me by fasting in this holy month? And Imam Ali says that since I've heard the Holy Prophet say who will assist me in this month by fasting, not a single day in Sha'ban went by such that I was not fasting. So Sha'ban is a month in which the Holy Prophet himself would perform fasts in the day and stay up in worship during the night. It is the preliminary month before the holy month of Ramadan, and as a preparation to welcome our friend, our divine friend, really, this holy month of Ramadan, we prepare ourselves by performing the rites of the month of Sha'ban, in fact. So this particular verse in your text, it says what? Can somebody tell me where exactly is the shahid mithal? Where exactly is the area in this particular verse that we are looking at and that links to our unit today? Which word is it?
Kutiba,
Kutiba.
And kutiba, right? So what does kutiba mean?
prescribed.
Prescribe. He will prescribe.
Yeah, prescribe. Okay. So we don't know who the prescriber is, right? Or do we know?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Who is the prescriber?
He is singular, masculine,
How do we know that?
because kataba is he, past tense, male, singular. So kutiba, I don't know.
But isn't it the passive form? It's in the past passive. So technically we shouldn't know.
Ahsan. So if it was that it is the active tense, then you're absolutely correct. If you saw kataba, you were saying, you know what, it is a singular masculine person who we're talking about, who the actor is. But in this case, because it's the past passive tense, we've removed the actor. And once you remove the actor, we don't know anymore who the actor is. This particular word, kutiba, right? It's in singularity, is pointing towards something completely different. It's pointing towards what used to be the object. Okay? It's pointing towards what used to be the object. Remember we said that when the object, just like how before we said when the subject is mentioned verbally, the verb itself comes as a singular verb. Remember that? We learned that in the past sessions.
Mm.
So kataba rajulani. You guys remember that?
Yeah.
If I've mentioned the word outside of if the word is no longer al-dhamir in the stomach of the fi'l, right? If it's been mentioned outside, and the fi'l itself always comes in what? In its singular sense, in its singular masculine sense, third person, kutiba or
I just,
kataba. Go ahead.
if I may, I have a question here. We know that I know based on the form that it's past passive, but couldn't we argue here that we know who is the kutiba, meaning that it was ordained or prescribed by God?
So I was leading and alluding to this exact question that when I asked you, do we know, right? And in the overall scope of the verse, of course we know who prescribed it. It wasn't person X or Y, it was Allah who prescribed it for us, correct? So in terms of the contextual understanding of who the actor is, it is possible that you know. So this denial of knowing the actor is not present in actuality. For example, when we say Qutil al-Hussein, we know who killed Imam. It's not like the person was unknown. We don't know who it is in the sense that history is ambiguous about who performed this action. No, we know who the bad people were who performed that action. Go ahead. Somebody.
Would we ever use kutibu then?
Kutibu.
Yeah, if it's like kutiba is for singular and we use kutiba for plural, would we ever use kutibu?
So let's work through this. If you have the na'ib fa'il not mentioned, right? And if it was hidden within the verb, that is when, what would happen? You would use the word kutibu. So if the na'ib fa'il is not mentioned, and in fact the object is plural, right? And you want it to be shown through the verb itself without mentioning the object, and that's how it would be formed. That's how it would take place. We had a very similar scenario happening with the active fail. Remember? When the active fail, the subject was not apparent in linguistical form, right? So if we had, for example, rajulani or rijal, right? The verb that came with that, for example, kharaja, it was still the mufrad, the singular word was used. Kharaja, as long as the subject was mentioned outside of the fi'l. Okay, so over here, the subject has disappeared, and in its place, the object has become the pseudo-subject, the vice subject, the deputy of the subject. And it's called the na'ib fa'il. Why is it called the na'ib fa'il? Because it takes on all the rulings of the fa'il. It doesn't take on the meaning of the fa'il. It takes upon all the rulings regarding the fa'il. So just like how a fa'il, if it was mentioned outside, the fi'il could be mufrad. In a very similar manner, if the na'ib fa'il is mentioned outside, now all of a sudden the fi'il majhul could be mufrad. Just like how if the fa'il, if it was not mentioned outside, then it would be shown in terms of the dhama'ir that were added to the fi'il, right? Ulimat, ulimata, ulimu, right? In the naib fa'il, it's in a very similar sense when I have not said the naib file outside of the fi'l, right? And it's hidden within the fi'l, then that's exactly what happens. Ulimat, ulimata, ulimu. In these cases, the naib file is not mentioned outside, rather it's hidden in the verb itself. Was I able to answer your question?
I think so.
Now, going back to the other question that we had, that in fact we know who performed the action, right? Contextually speaking, we can know who the subject is, right? Textually speaking, we don't know. So this is where, when I said that in balagha, in the science of ma'ani, when we use passive tenses, it is associated with profound meaning with it too, where certain meanings are highlighted for us, right? So for example, if the word kutibu here is mentioned, we know from the context that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who has prescribed fasting for us. But Allah chooses to introduce this concept to us in a manner where the actor is not textually present. Although contextually, the actor is known. Contextually, the actor is who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Textually, the focus is taken away from the actor and towards the action and upon whom the action was acted upon. So in this particular case, kutiba alaykumus siyamu. What is being put into focus in the textual sense? Kutiba is, siyamu is, and alaykum is. Right? In that fasting was prescribed for you, meaning fasting itself has a very strong, intimate, existential relationship with you. You meaning who? Us. Fasting is something that was made and prescribed for us. Okay? It's designed to fit our person. In all capacities of our existences, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, in all capacities of our existence, fasting is designed for us. Okay. The worst container which is filled in this dunya is the stomach. One of the ahadith we have. Okay. Another ahadith in Wasa'il al-Shia, volume number 10, just on top of my head, I recently was reading this, around page number 148. It talks about how if a person was to open their fast with a bit of water and ensure that they ate suhoor, these two actions are capable to allow mankind to fast many a days, if not every day, except for those days that are haram, for example, like Eid and so on. Right? The hadith was talking about that, meaning that fasting is something that is not distant from mankind. Rather, it is made for us. It is prescribed, and hence, because it's made for us, it is prescribed to us. Okay. Looking at the Arabic now here, the verse says what? It says kutiba ala alladhina min qabl. Oh, so kutiba alaykum as-siyamu, and then it says kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. So fasting is prescribed for us in a very similar manner how it was prescribed from those before us, right? And then the reasoning why fasting was prescribed is mentioned too. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, such that you may be people who attain taqwa. One small point about taqwa. Can somebody tell me what is taqwa?
Piety.
Piety is a good word that we use for translation. Translation, sure. Over here, the word that is used is self-restraint. Some scholars have translated, for example, Allama Tabatabai in his teachings, and Atullah Sa'adat Parwa in his teachings, have used the word taqwa and said it in this way. It says, don't sell Allah short. To not sell Allah short in your life. So what does that mean? When an opportunity to turn away from Allah and to commit a sin occurs, you don't sell Allah short. You hold fast to Allah in your life. You choose Allah over non-Allah. So this choosing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over non-Allah in your actions is called taqwa. To not sell Allah short, basically. So kutiba alaykumus siyam. Fasting was prescribed to us such that we achieve taqwa. Instead of going fast, I thought instead of going fast, opening up the meaning behind this verse, bringing the full verse itself, and then opening up the meaning, giving you 1 or 2 pointers regarding how kutiba could have certain implications to it, and I pulled those in front of you, that it has an existential link to us, hence prescription here when we're talking about something that's prescribed to you, and the focus is on the prescribing and the action itself and ourselves. That means that there's actually an existential link between the three. And we talked about naib fa'il as well. Let's continue. So chapter number 13 finishes here. Chapter number 14 starts in a very similar manner. How are we doing for time? We have about 20-25 minutes.
Good.
Yes?
Yes.
So in a very similar manner that we just covered chapter number 13, chapter 14 is its sister chapter. It's very similar in nature. Okay. So we studied the active mudari form in the past, right? So daraba became, when we want to take daraba and make it into a mudari, what did it become?
يضرب.
يضرب.
Yadribu, okay. Nasara became
ينصر.
ينصر.
yansuru. Accent. If you can see that in the majhul format, yansuru becomes what?
ينصر.
Yunsaru. Okay. What's happening here? The ya has been taken into a dhamma instead of a fatha, and the word one before the last word becomes a fatha instead of a kasra. Okay. Yunsaru, yunsarani, yunsaruna. Okay. If you notice now, yunsaruna, the translation is not they are helping, rather they are helped or they will be helped. So if you notice, the they is hidden inside the verb itself. Okay. If I was to pull that out and instead I was to say, let's say, ar-rijal, and I pulled it out of yunsaruna, what would yunsaruna look like then?
Yunsaru.
Ahsant. So here's the conjugation here. Can somebody please conjugate for me first with yunsaru to become familiarized, then with alima. Take alima and make it majhul for me, please. In the mudari. Requires 2 jumps now, 2 conversions. First you take alima into its active mudari, then you take the active mudari to the majhul mudari. See if somebody can do that. So first do nusira, read it once out loud to get familiarized with the form of it. And the second form, in the second thing, try to take the root words alima and turn them into mudari majhul for me, please. Based on this form that's shown to you. Go ahead.
يعلم.
So alima becomes what?
يعلم in present, active, and then يعلم.
So in active tense, does it become yu'lamu or does it become
يعلم.
ya'lam?
Is active.
Okay, and then from active now take me to the mudari majhul.
يعلم.
Accent. And just for fun, take me to the madi majhul.
علم.
Accent. Are you guys comfortable conjugating all 14 of the conjugations that are shown here?
Yes,
Are you
with some practice, yes.
Okay, so please take this down as homework that you have to practice this. Try to use words that exist in your vocabulary already and try to convert them from active tenses in their madi to mudare and then from their mudare to their majhul. And also do the madi majhul as well. Try to convert them. And try your best not to use written text. In the sense, try to do it conceptually in your mind. And what that does is it allows you to not have a handicap when you're trying to convert them. You're trying to convert them through just the conceptual understanding you have, which is also important. It gives speed, really. So you're developing certain neurological pathways when you practice this, such that speed is given, and then you can recognize this much quicker and so on and so forth. Okay. So that's homework for us to practice our fi'l mudari, both the active and the present tense, fi'l madi, both the active and present tense, and the conversion between them conceptually. This little text was copied from lesson number 13 because it's also true for lesson number 14. Lesson number 14 doesn't have an explicit mention of this, from what I recall, but this content within it is actually absolutely true, in the sense that the na'ib fa'il comes and replaces now the subject. So because it's a replacement in terms of what? The ahkam that the subject had, the rulings that the subject had. That if it was brought out of the fi'l, what would happen? Or if it was brought in the fi'l, what would happen? Right? If it was a feminine, textually speaking, if it was feminine, what would happen? If it's textually speaking, it was masculine, what would happen? In that regard, the na'ib fa'il shares all those rulings with the subject. In terms of meaning, though, they're two different things. It's not the subject, it's the vice subject or the deputy of the subject. Now, similar to before, we saw that the yaf, we already practiced this, is just making the appearance for us that in the active present tense, there were constants in the ya and the lam, right? It was always a fatha on the ya and always a dhamma on the lam, right? Unless an amil came upon and changed that for us, right? And we covered all those amil before. If they became mudari majzum, for example, or mansub, an amil would come, and then the constant, which is dhamma at the lamul fil, would change. But in its rough form, in its marfu form, the lam would always have a dhamma on it. It was constantly having a dhamma. And the ainul fail would change in its haraka depending on what the Arabs used as the ainul fail's haraka. Right? So that the dictionary there helps us. But in the passive sense, it's a constant form. The ya, the lam, and the ainul fail all have a constant haraka on it. Let's look at a verse, and I brought the full text from the verse itself as well. And let's consider this, and inshallah we will be after this practice is finished, the content of chapter number 4, lesson number 14, sorry, from the text will be finished. So over here, what is a shahid misal in the verse that the text provides?
يرجع.
Yurja'u. Okay. Without looking at the translation too much, what do you think is happening here? What's the root word being used?
رجع.
Raja'a is being used, okay? And raja'a means what exactly?
Return.
Return, okay? And then take raja'a into its mudari, what active mudari?
يرجع.
يرجع.
Yarja'u, okay? And now from the active mudari is going towards the majhul.
يرجع. يرجع.
Yurja'u. Okay, and what has been taken out? When you take something from the active mudari and you turn it into majhul mudari, what disappears, textually speaking?
Yeah.
The ya,
Sorry. No, no.
sorry? Textually speaking, something that is typically present with the active sense, active tense, disappears.
Is it the subject?
The subject disappears. Textually speaking, the subject is no longer mentioned. So this ilayhi yurja'ul amru kulluhu, in this particular statement, there is no subject present for yurja'u. Why? Because yurja'u is there's not an active format. Okay. So if you look at the translation, it says to him every affair is returned. Right? You guys see that?
So what is the
Right?
what is the subject?
So the person returning that particular affair, or that affair itself, which is being returned to him, right? The returner is not mentioned here. Who is causing this return to take place? The fact that returned is there is mentioned. Okay. Contextually speaking, we know that return, the coming back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is also by means of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? The methodology by which things are returned is also in His control. He is the cause of all causes. Right? But the focus is not on that. The focus is on something completely different. And I brought the full verse here to show you why it's mentioned in this particular way. You see in the Holy Quran, in this particular statement, it could have come and said, Yurja'ul amru kulluhu ilayhi. It could have also come and said, Yurja'u ilayhi al-amru. The kulluh was not required. And these statements would be correct in terms of its grammatical sense. I mean, we weren't grammatically incorrect. But when you change the form in which the words come in the sentence, you therefore change the meaning that that particular sentence is giving to you. So I wrote the full verse here. Let's look at the full verse. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولله غيب السماوات والأرض وإليه يرجع الأمر كله فاعبدوه وتوكل عليه. Okay. وما ربك بغافل عما تعملون. Three main things are happening. وَلِلَّهِ غَيْبُ السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ is being mentioned to us that all the secrets of the heavens and the earth belong to Allah, right? And again, the lillah is brought forth. When the lillah becomes brought forth, so instead of saying وَغَيْبُ السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ لِلَّهِ, the lillah is brought forth. And we're saying instead وَلِلَّهِ غَيْبُ السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. We're specifying that only to him, right, does the ghaib of the samawat and the ard belong to. He is the only owner. The onlyness comes from this preceding of lillah on the ghayb samawati wal ard. Okay. So in the translation, if you notice, it's not explicitly mentioned, this only portion. But now that I've mentioned this point to you, whenever so for example, when you say Iyaka na'budu, we're saying only to you we worship. Iyaka nasta'in, we say only to you do we seek help from. Right? I mean, we don't seek help from anybody else, and we don't worship anybody else. In a very similar manner, when the lillah is brought forth, غَيْبُ السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ is only for lillah, only belongs to Allah. And then it says something very interesting. وَإِلَيْهِ يُرْجَأُ الْأَمْرُ كُلُّهُ. That's when the secrets and the unseen aspects of the samawat and ard are only belonging to Allah. You should also know that to Him only does every affair return in its entirety. Okay? Meaning what? He has ultimate control of all affairs in its entirety. So when you believe in these two statements, the natural outcome of that is فَأْبُدْهُ. So then what? Worship Him. Submit your will to Him. And what else? وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَيْهِ. And now you can put your trust on Him. Why? Because He is the one who every action, its ultimate destination is in His hand. Once you have reached the level of belief of the first and the second portions mentioned, the third portion is a natural byproduct. If a person is having difficulty having tawakkul on Allah, right? If he's having difficulty in becoming the abd of Allah, then he has to go back and understand that perhaps there's a deficiency in understanding وَلِلَّهِ غَيْبُ السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, or there's a deficiency in understanding وَإِلَيْهِ يُرْجَأُ الْأَمْرُ كُلُّهُ. Okay. The past and the present passive tense holds profound meaning. For example, over here, when the mudari majhul is used, meaning it doesn't, what's being emphasized is that everything is returned to him, right? The returner who's causing that, the focus is taken away from that. It's saying, listen, it's to him, he's in control. Every affair, kulluhu, is returned to him. The focus is brought upon that particular portion only. Okay, so we understand now in terms of grammar what it means, how it's formed, and by opening up this one example, I showed you how in terms of meaning it plays sometimes a significant role as well, right? And then bringing things before or after or changing up the order of the sentence can also create additional meanings for us. Let's look at the three examples at the bottom of the slide. So let's look at this particular one right here. What's the shahid misal here? What's the shahid misal in verse?
تظلمون.
Sorry?
تظلمون.
تظلمون.
Is it
It's both تظلمون and تظلمون passive. No?
What's the shahid misal? Meaning the word here that is specific to our chapter. Is it the first word? Is it tadlimun or is it tublamun?
تظلمون.
Tublamun. What is tadlimun?
That's the مضارع active.
Ahsan, it's a mudari active. Does tadlimun have a subject to it?
Here, no.
It has a subject to it, but the subject is not mentioned outside of the verb. It's mentioned within the verb. it's not yudlimu, right? It's not the singular mufrad form that has been brought in the past, in the present time. It is tadlimuna. Tadlimuna was jam, right? Jam meaning what? Meaning the actors, the fa'il really becomes the plural form. So it's basically saying you people, right?
Yeah.
You people deal not unjustly. So if you don't do dhulm, then what?
Then you will not be unjust.
You will not be dealt with unjustly. لا تظلمون ولا تظلمون.
Mm.
You don't do dhulm. If you don't become the actor of dhulm, you will then not become the receiver of dhulm. Okay. Go ahead.
Subject is part of the verb.
So subject can in the Arabic language can be brought either outside of the verb, right? Or it could be displayed with the ending of the verb. So when we said, for example, remember when we conjugate, so let me take us back to the conjugation slide, which would be right here. So imagine this was a chart for the active tense. So it would be looking very different, but just imagine for a second it was that chart. All these differences that are happening, the dual, the plural, the third person, the masculine, the feminine, what is that? It's talking about who the actor was, right? If this was active tense. Okay? It was talking about who the performer is, who the subject in these particular af'al are. Now, that subject is hidden inside these verbs. That subject has the capacity to be pulled out of the words and mentioned explicitly in the text. Meaning right now, you're only given the understanding of whether the subject is a male or female, if it's a singular, dual, or plural, but you don't know who it is. You don't know if it's men, you don't know if it's animals, you don't know if it's jinn, you don't know if it's a qawm, you don't know who it is, who the specific it is, right? You just know certain aspects of them. You know the quantity of them, you know the gender of them, right? And that's about it. Okay. You also know if they're present or if they're not present. Okay. But that's, I didn't mention that because there is possibility that somebody is present, but use a ghaib for them as a kinaya, as like basically when we do this too, somebody is present, but if I don't want to directly mention this person, I can use a form that says basically is a kinaya. I mean, I don't want to explicitly mention this guy, so but I also want to get the meaning across. So I might use a different form, for example. For example, someone can say somebody made a mistake, but they don't want to mention who's made a mistake. Like the person in the class is a parent that the person's here, but you don't want to mention who it is. Sometimes if that's the case scenario, you might change that, but that's a separate discussion altogether. The subjects are within the verbs. Subjects are hidden within the verbs here. Right? These are the actors that the verb takes upon. Certain aspects of them is mentioned to you in terms of their mufrad, their muthanna, and their jam nature, as well as their masculine and feminine nature too. So over
So
here,
sorry, just to confirm, so like tadlimun here, we could say like
sorry?
technically with tadlimun here, we could have, like, let's say it's not a Quranic verse, so you could have added two subjects. مثلا أنتم محمد and Ali تظلمون somebody else, right? So that would have been the subject outside of the verb. I think that's what I'm understanding from you. And but here, because the subject is not outside, so here I'll know that what the subject is, not the specific names or the people exactly who they are, but I know that it's masculine plural.
Perfect.
Because of the ending, correct?
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. So it's plural. So it wouldn't be just two people. You mentioned only two, but it could have been, if you'd mentioned three, then that would be the verb outside. Those
right, exactly.
So you don't know Ali, Bakr, and Zayd. You don't know who this tadlimun in the specific sense is. It could be all of mankind. Right? 3 all the way to every single person. Right?
Yeah.
But when the subject is hidden in the verb, you just know about the fact that it's jam. You know if it's masculine or feminine or not, right? And those are the 2 certain things you know. Is everybody comfortable with what I just mentioned right now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
This goes beyond your book does not cover this. Your book does not explain this. Your book doesn't dive into this aspect, but I thought it was important to know, just basically so you're more comfortable with what's happening basically when you're conjugating as well. So wala tuzlamun. So tuzlamun has what? Does it have a subject or does it have a vice subject?
A vice subject.
A
There's no
vice.
subject.
Vice subject. Right. Okay. So this brings us to the end of the session today, inshallah. The many examples that are in your text, please go through all of them. Make sure you're able to understand what the shahid misal is and what is happening in that particular sense.
So for the text, sorry, I don't have the remainder. Where can I find it? I only have up to Unit 2, Lesson 9, I think.
Okay. So
I can send it, inshallah, on the WhatsApp group if it's accessible on the group for all.
Perfect.
Thanks, Yasmin. Thank you.
That we really appreciate.
Just confirm, please, that that it arrives, because it may be a larger folder. I'll try right now.
Okay, excellent.
So it's important that if you can go back and those chapters that you weren't able to, please try to find them and then take some time out and do as many of the examples as you can. Practice is extremely important in becoming fluent with the Arabic language. Otherwise, we can learn rules and then very quickly forget them if we haven't practiced them. Okay? So the more we practice these rules, the more it is made concrete for our persons. This is just a small message regarding the holy month of Sha'ban that the institute that I study in published and released. I thought to bring it to you guys. I thought it was very beautiful how it mentions basically our viewpoint regarding entering this beautiful month. I just left it here on the screen for you guys to read and enjoy. Inshallah, in the slides that are posted, it could be there as well. Okay? So you can look at that and read it on your own time. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows these sessions to be a means of getting closer to Him by understanding His text, by interacting with the Holy Quran, more so in this month and the coming months, inshallah, as the thawab for that is increased in the holy month of Ramadan. Okay? So hopefully that we continually practice working with the Holy Quran, working with the words and the ayat, and figuring out the meaning. And Allah allows this to be a means of us getting closer to Him.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for teaching us.
I hope you guys benefit from the classes.
Yasmin, it was received. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Inshallah, I'll upload the Unit 3 with appendices, because